Welcome to the Drift and Ramble podcast. I'm Steve Blizen. Each episode will explore true stories and American legends. From the pages of history and a few stories handed down over the years, we'll look at the people, places, and events that helped shape a nation. Stories of survival, notable frontier men and women, explorers who struck it rich, and the outlaws that stole it from them. There'll be studies of saloon girls, swindlers, banditry, and bad men, profiles of lawmen and American Indians, and the good and evil that existed between them. We'll amble through the past. We'll delve into the folklore of the times and maybe even uncover a ghost story or two. So, saddle up or settle in for the Drift and Ramble podcast. This is episode 22. Shakespeare once wrote, "What's in a name?" The power of names is something most of us never really stop to ponder. But a name can have tremendous impact on the trajectory of one's life. And names that had meaning in some circles may have completely different meanings later in life or under different circumstances. Take the case of Richard Barter, perhaps better known as Rattlesnake Dick. What is your first impression of that moniker? Sounds to me like this guy might be someone you'd want to avoid. I mean, who wants to deal with a guy named after a venomous serpent? And come on, let's face it, he's a dick. But just because you have a nickname doesn't mean you've actually earned it, or that you have to live up to or down to it. Still, some people have a habit of not letting things go. And in the serpentine tale of Rattlesnake Dick, we find that nicknames can be just as cruel as the people living under them. So just who was Richard Barter? And how did he get the nickname Rattlesnake Dick? And does the 40 grand in gold bullion he helped steal from a Wells Fargo stagecoach still remain hidden today? Our story begins in Quebec, Canada, about the time Dick's parents died in 1850. That's when Richard, his brother, his sister, her husband, and a cousin all joined a wagon train and headed out to Corvallis, Oregon, where they built a modest home. The Barter boys and their cousin kept hearing about the gold rush in California. But by the time the three boys finally set off to California, all the good claims had been staked. Their only choice was to go to work gathering gold for someone else. They wound up in Placer County, California, near Auburn, at a spot called Rattlesnake Bar along the American River.
Hey, mister, mind if my family and I work a claim next to yours?
Take a good look around here, Greenhorn. Everything you just set your eyes on is my claim. Now you can come work for me, but you ain't gonna work nothing next to me, 'cause it's all mine.
Now, how's a man supposed to earn a living if you already snapped up all the good ground?
Well now, son, how you make a living ain't my concern. You're pretty feisty for a greenhorn, I'll give you that. Tell you what, you come work for me and you'll make your living. You could start tomorrow tending them mules. They're about as stubborn as you are. Maybe you can work your pan after them mules is all cared for.
Just about anyone who showed up late to the gold rush wound up working for someone else, and young Richard Barter was stuck working for other miners, or he faced going back to Canada empty-handed. Dick was optimistic about his prospects, but his brother and cousin had had enough, and eventually they went back to Canada. But Dick was wild and reckless, and he held fast to his dreams of striking it rich. Pretty soon, folks started calling him Rattlesnake Dick. Maybe folks thought he was sneaky, or maybe they just figured he was working at Rattlesnake Bar, so the nickname just made sense. But there was nothing in Dick's early days to indicate he was anything less than just another hard-working young man with dreams of becoming rich. But fate has a way of finding its mark, regardless of the best-made plans. And Rattlesnake Dick's ominous nickname was about to earn him a reputation as a cattle rustler.
Now dang blast it, I'm 6 head of cattle short on my account this morning. I reckon them miners must be stealing my cows.
I bet you is that ornery cuss Rattlesnake Dick. That boy is nothing but trouble, I hear. Reckless, wild, beady-eyed, and most dangerous of all, optimistic.
Optimistic? Well, I'll show him.
Though Dick was eventually cleared of all charges of the theft, the stigma it created remained. And later that year, Dick found himself the target of more accusations. This time, it was for stealing a mule. With frontier justice being what it was in the Old West, it didn't take much to convince a judge of his guilt. Dick was convicted on flimsy evidence. He merely happened to be in the right place at the wrong time.
Says here your name is Rattlesnake Dick. Is that right, son?
Well, Your Honor, most folks seem to call me that. My given name is Richard.
All right, Dick. Did you steal old man Mercer's mule?
No, sir. I was way down on the other side of the wash trying to pan some gold.
How do I know if you're telling the truth here, Dick? You might be lying to me. I reckon a man named Rattlesnake done earned that reputation being low and ornery like the serpent he's named after.
He's lower than a snake fart, Judge. You just look at him. You know he did it.
Bailiff, take that fella out back and hang him. And you, Rattlesnake Dick, I reckon you're gonna go to jail on account of them beady eyes you got.
What? But, Your Honor, I ain't never stole nothing in my whole life. I'm innocent, I tell you. I thought a court of law was a place where justice was done. This ain't justice. Why, you're just as crooked as that cane you walked in with.
Lucky for old Rattlesnake Dick, the real thief confessed while Dick was still in jail. And although he was once again cleared of the charges, now his reputation had been permanently soiled. Richard Barter changed his name to Dick Woods and hightailed it to Shasta County, where he spent the next 2 years living a peaceful, law-abiding life. He lived his quiet, meager life and supported himself by prospecting around the area known as French Gulch. He had just about forgotten about his old nickname when someone recognized him from Rattlesnake Bar.
Hey there, feller. You mind giving me a hand with this here mule? Darn thing's about as stubborn as my wife, and she ain't that much better looking, tell you the truth.
You mean that mule or your wife?
Well, hey now. Them kind of insults ain't necessary there, partner. You ain't even met my wife, and you just now met my mule. Why, you're meaner than a two-headed snake. Hold on. Well, I'll be. I thought you looked familiar. Why, you're Rattlesnake Dick.
I never did take kindly to that name. Now you got me figured all wrong here, partner. Let me help you with that mule.
Get your hands off of my mule, you thieving mule thief. I heard tell what you done. Cattle rustling, mule thieving. Heard you went to jail for stealing old man Mercer's mule. Well, you ain't getting this one, no sir. Now back off before I start ventilating them clothes you're wearing with this here 6-gun.
Dick fled the area, but by 1853 he had become desperate. Dick figured he could never outrun that nickname, so he gave up on living an honest life. But the first criminal act in Rattlesnake Dick's real crime wave was not that impressive. He tried to steal some clothes, got caught, and went to prison.
Well, I see you got a fine pair of breeches there, mister. How'd you like to pay for those? Cash, trade, gold dust, or with a personal banknote?
Let's see. How about a personal banknote?
Okay, I'll need 6 forms of ID, your current street address, 2 co-signers, and a local witness.
Will you take my mule as a witness?
Sorry, no mules. They're too stubborn and hard to get straight answers out of.
I hear you. That one I got ain't reckoned no stereotypes. Tell you what. Hey, look over yonder. Ain't that President Taylor's ghost?
What? Hey, come back here, you varmint!
Rattlesnake Dick was caught and convicted of grand larceny. which makes you wonder just how much those britches were really worth. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison at San Quentin, which was then a brand new prison. But if Richard Barter arrived at jail a man still unfamiliar with a life of crime, prison hardened Dick. He met and befriended convict Tom Bell, and to say the two became thick as thieves would be an understatement. During his time in prison, it's possible Dick met brothers George and Cyrus Skinner, who would also figure prominently in Dick's criminal history. After his release, Dick joined Tom Bell's gang, and the men engaged in all manner of murderous banditry. The gang stole horses, robbed people, and killed folks indiscriminately. Tom Bell was once a surgeon during the Mexican-American War, so the grisly aspect of killing held little sway in this former doctor's conscience. Although he was unsuccessful in his first attempt, Tom Bell was allegedly the very first outlaw to rob a stagecoach. But the robbery didn't go as planned. A female passenger was killed in the gunfire when 2 stagecoach guards kept Bell and his men at bay. 2 other passengers were wounded in the crossfire. When word spread that the stagecoach had been carrying $10,000 in gold bullion, Bell unknowingly inspired a whole new breed of outlaws, including Rattlesnake Dick. When Bell was shot and killed in 1856, Rattlesnake Dick took over Bell's gang. Dick and the gang commenced to robbing stagecoaches throughout the California and Nevada territories. But these were not sharp criminal minds, and Dick was hell-bent on fame as much as fortune. Criminals today are really no different. Whether it's a fleeting moment of fame on Facebook or a unanimous YouTube sensation, idiots will do almost anything to achieve notoriety without giving a second thought to consequence. In Dick's case, he wanted the whole world to know, and fear, the name of Rattlesnake Dick. So he made a point of telling every victim of his crimes.
Hands up there, partner. You can tell him you was robbed by Rattlesnake Dick.
I'm sorry there, feller. My hearing ain't so good. Did you say you was called Little Snake Dick?
No, I'm Rattlesnake Dick. And get your hands up where I can see 'em.
How's that? Little Dick the Snake?
No, God dang it. I said rattle, like a baby's rattle. Snake, like a slithering serpent. And Dick, like short for Richard.
Okay, I think I got it now. Baby Dick Short. That's who I tell the law robbed me.
Dang it, old man, you ain't got the sense God gave a grapefruit.
Look here, youngin'. First you take all my money, and then you tell me you want the law to know who done it. I'm just trying to get the story straight. So you want me to say I was robbed by Short Dick?
Never mind. I'll just leave a note.
Dick made sure that anyone with ears heard the name of Rattlesnake Dick. He even managed to get himself arrested several times during this stage of his criminal career. But somehow, he always managed to escape. Eventually, Dick built his own gang of hand-picked desperados. The Skinner brothers, George and Cyrus, Big Dolph Newton, a guy named Romero, and Bill Carter were regulars. The outlaws plagued the territories around the mining camps and towns of Northern California and Nevada, while earning quite a reputation for themselves. Rattlesnake Dick became known as the Pirate of the Placers. One night, Dick overheard a drunk miner say that there were large shipments of gold coming out of the Wairika and Klamath River mines. Wairika became a boom town after gold was discovered back in 1851. And by 1856, large shipments were coming out of the Trinity Mountains like clockwork. Dick and the boys began to craft a plan to relieve the stagecoach of its cargo. For those who forget how heavy gold can be, especially in large quantities, the hardest part of robbing a stagecoach full of gold was making off with the loot. Once again, Dick's intelligence was called into question when he made a fateful decision not to use the Wells Fargo branded mule train already attached to the stagecoach to carry all that gold. For some reason, Dick thought it was best to get mules from somewhere else. Undoubtedly, those would be stolen mules too, bearing someone else's brand. But that little detail never seemed to bother Dick. Anyway, the gang set off to rob the mule train and grab the gold. They set up along a prime spot to make their attack and waited for the mule team that came through on the first of every month. Dick sent George Skinner and 3 other men to handle the stagecoach robbery, while he and Cyrus rode off to steal fresh mules.
Whoa! Whoa! Hold up there! Hey, mister! You need to get that horse up out of the road. We can't get past you.
Heck darn, boys. I sure am sorry about that. My horse just up and died right here. I was fixing to ask you boys for a ride. You mind helping me get my horse off the trail?
Mister, I ain't blind. I can see that horse is still breathing just as plain as day.
Well, looky there then. I reckon that's some sort of miracle. You can probably see that fella over there with his pistols pointed at you. Oh, and there's another one over there by them boulders. He got him a fine repeating rifle, all loaded up and ready to fire. Oh, and there's that one up near them trees over yonder, with a pair of Colt revolvers. Of course, I got a pair too. Now, if you'd be so kind as to step down off that stagecoach for me, partner.
Dag-nabbit! I knew I was going to get robbed out here one day.
I reckon you just got lucky. How much gold are you carrying today?
$80,600 in gold is what the freight bill says.
Woohoo! Now how about you move around real slow and peaceful like and hand over your guns? We don't plan to do no killing today, but you know how plans can change.
George and the gang had successfully robbed the stage, and they were to meet with Dick and Cyrus soon after. But while Cyrus Skinner and Rattlesnake Dick were off to fetch fresh mules, George and his boys started to get nervous. George needed those mules to make it down the mountain. Rattlesnake Dick seemed to be taking his time. So George made up his own plan.
Boys, we can't carry all this gold on our own mules and horses. It's too dang slow, and I'm afraid the law will be after us by now. I don't know what's become of my brother, or Rattlesnake Dick. We're supposed to meet him down at Folsom. We ain't never gonna get there trying to haul all this gold. Let's split up this trunk with $40,600 in equal parts, and I'll hide the other $40,000 around here somewheres. Now, you fellas all turn your heads and look towards the east until I tell you it's safe to turn around again.
George buried half the gold bullion, and the rest was divided up among the men. They rode down into Folsom, but Dick and Cyrus were nowhere to be found. What the outlaws didn't know was that Dick and Cyrus had been arrested for trying to steal those fresh mules. The boys headed to Auburn, but along the way they were intercepted by a posse led by a Wells Fargo detective named Jack Barkley. The outlaws tried to flee, but Barkley and his men opened fire, and in the resulting gun battle, George Skinner was killed. Romero was wounded, and Newton and Carter surrendered. The lawmen recovered $40,600, and the surviving outlaws were all given 10-year prison terms at Angel Island. Meanwhile, the posse returned to Folsom and searched for the missing $40,000 in gold bullion. But since the survivors were in jail and George was dead, nobody could say where the gold was buried. Now, it should be mentioned here that during my research, I found a reference to a robbery that fits the place and time, and this was also attributed to Tom Bell's gang, which is interesting because Rattlesnake Dick worked pretty hard to get his name out there, and even though Tom Bell was dead at the time of this robbery, it was Bell, not Rattlesnake Dick, who got the credit for the crime, albeit posthumously. The version I found was listed in The History of Siskiyou County by D.J. Stewart and Company from 1881. The dollar amounts are different. Vastly different. It would have been about $23,000, not $80,600. So, does this refer to a different crime, or did the dollars get inflated with each telling of the story? In The History of Placer County, written in 1882 by Marion Angel, the dollar amounts are possibly $80,600. To add to the mystery, Wells Fargo has always been tight-lipped about these robberies. Even today, they have been less than forthcoming with reliable information. Denying the losses in the days of the Old West was possibly a way of protecting their interests. After all, Wells Fargo had become the primary carrier for large shipments of gold, and they weren't about to risk losing that business because of a few headlines and highwaymen. Dick and Cyrus Skinner eventually managed to escape incarceration before their trials, and both returned to Folsom to meet up with their gang. After learning of George's death and their own exhaustive search, the location of the gold remains a mystery to this day. Dick never found that pile of gold, but that didn't stop him from continuing his life of crime. He continued his quest for self-made notoriety, and he continued to be arrested, jailed, and then escaped before going to trial. With each new arrest, he grew more brazen, and eventually he camped out by the sheriff's home to avenge his own capture. But Sheriff John Craig Boggs did not return home that night, so Rattlesnake Dick scribbled a note and pinned it to Boggs' front door. Dick continued his notorious ways until July 11, 1859, when he and an unnamed partner were finally spotted by a posse comprised of tax collector George Martin, Under Sheriff George Johnson, and Deputy Crutcher. The posse confronted the two outlaws, and Dick, being Dick, asked the men to see a warrant before pulling his pistol and killing George Martin in cold blood. He then tried to steal one of their horses, but Crutcher and Johnson opened fire, hitting Rattlesnake Dick twice before he evaded the two surviving lawmen. Though the posse continued to search for Dick, he wasn't found until the next morning. A dead body was found near the road with what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot. It was later identified as Rattlesnake Dick. Richard Barter had come to California in search of fame and fortune. A law-abiding citizen, he was falsely accused of crimes until he decided to live up, or down to, his own reputation. His gang was responsible for stealing a significantly large sum of gold bullion. And yet, poor Dick never got to even put his hands on it. When he was found dead with 3 bullet wounds, only 2 could be attributed to the shots fired by the posse that recognized him. But the third was possibly fired by his own hand. Richard Barter, or Rattlesnake Dick, was only 26 when he died. Oh, and that gold that went missing? Well, that's still hidden somewhere around the Trinity Mountains. Some folks claim that it was found by Wells Fargo way back in the 1850s. But in those days, Wells Fargo had good reason to claim the gold was found. They couldn't afford to have the public think that they would simply lose track of $40,000 worth of gold bullion. Should we believe them? What if that gold is still out there, buried in some long-forgotten hillside? Tom Correa at AmericanCowboyChronicles.com did the math. He states that an ounce of gold was worth $20.67 in 1856, about the same cost as a new Colt pistol. But today, the price of gold is about $1,200 per ounce. That would make that missing stash of gold worth well over $2 million. Kind of makes me want to go out and get a metal detector. Many resources were used in researching this story. Though every effort has been made to provide facts, some discrepancies may arise. I'd like to acknowledge the following resources. History of Placer County, California, by Marion Angel, 1882. History of Siskiyou County, California, by D.J. Stewart and Company, 1881. Badges and Buckshot, Lawlessness in Old California, by John Bosenecker. Kathy Weiser Alexander and legendsofamerica.com. Tom Correa and AmericanCowboyChronicles.com. Curious about what's coming up on the next Drift and Ramble podcast? Well, stick around because it's a story that I found very, very compelling. I'll tell you more in just a moment, but first, I want to say thanks for listening to the Drift and Ramble podcast. If you like the show, you can really help us out by leaving a review on iTunes or Stitcher. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter @Drift and Ramble. And if you like to hear exclusive content or stock up on some Drift and Ramble swag, please visit our Patreon page. It's easy to get to, and you'll find important information like credits for cast and crew, show notes, and links, and you don't even have to pay for most of this stuff. But if you do choose to support the show, you'll definitely be rewarded. Check it out at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Drift and Ramble. Once again, that's patreon.com/Drift and Ramble. Folks, you may be aware that Drift and Ramble is part of the Fate Crafters Network. Fate Crafters is a group of highly talented writers, producers, voice actors, composers, and sound designers producing some of the best audio drama content available today. One of the Fate Crafters shows I'm really enjoying lately is called The Tunnels. The Tunnels is a full-cast audio drama focused on the exploration of some mysterious tunnels found in a small Georgia town. As the story progresses, the fear factor rises. Just what in the heck is down there, lurking in those tunnels? Is it escaped inmates from a nearby insane asylum? Criminals using the tunnel as a secret hideout? Or something far more sinister? There's really only one way to find out. Check out The Tunnels on iTunes or anywhere great podcasts can be found. The Tunnels is also on Facebook and at fatecrafters.net. On the next Drift and Ramble podcast, the year is 1862. The Dakota people have been working with whites to coexist in Minnesota. They have held up their end of the bargain, made through multiple one-sided treaties. But when their crops fail and the Bureau of Indian Affairs proves to be a cesspool of corruption, the Dakota decide to take action against the whites. This led to the Sioux Uprising, or the Dakota War of 1862. In the aftermath was America's largest mass execution. On the next Drift and Ramble podcast, it's the story of the Dakota 38. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks to all the wonderful voice talent that helped make the Drift and Ramble podcast possible. We wouldn't have a show if it wasn't for you folks. From Potpourri Theater, Pete Lutz plays the part of the crime victim.
How's that? My hearing ain't so good.
From Audio Oblivious Productions, Austin Beach plays the part of Rattlesnake Dick.
This ain't justice. Why, you're just as crooked as that cane you walked in with.
And The Prospector.
Hey there, feller. You mind giving me a hand with this here mule?
Scott Phillips plays the role of the Claim Boss.
Everything you just set your eyes on is my claim.
Drew Profit plays the role of the judge.
I reckon you're gonna go to jail on account of them beady eyes you've got.
And George Skinner.
My horse just up and died right here. I was fixing to ask you boys for a ride. You mind helping me get my horse off the trail?
Mike Jensen plays the shopkeeper.
Now, dang blast it, I'm 6 head of cattle short on my account this morning. I reckon them miners must be stealing my cows.
Danielle Reese plays the female shopkeeper.
Well, I see you got a fine pair of breeches there, mister.
And the store customer.
That boy's nothing but trouble, I hear. Reckless, wild, beady-eyed, and most dangerous of all, optimistic.
Jeremy Hennessy plays the role of the mule skinner.
Whoa! Whoa! Hold up there! Mister, I ain't blind. I can see that horse is still breathing just as plain as day.
Until we meet again, I'm Steve Blizzen. See you on the next Drift and Ramble podcast.
The Drift and Ramble podcast is a Clear Voice Media production, hosted and produced by Steve Blizzen, with segment research and voice acting by Cheryl Blizzen. Additional contributions and content have been made possible by support from individuals dedicated to the art and science of storytelling and exploring the still fertile promise of the American West.